So before we close the show, fam, last thing I want to talk about, since we're talking about presidential elections, because I know that we have a little bit differences of opinion. Really not that far off, but understanding that coming outside of electoral politics, I think that there's a you and Misty feel very strongly about that. Where I've talked about, hey man, let's look at this RFK situation and the things he's talking about. And I was first of all, I'm getting ready to give a speech in New York this Saturday in Kingston with Gerald Celente and his group. Congressman Dennis Kucinich will be out there representing the RFK campaign. Either way, I'm a big fan of Dennis Kucinich. Not that I've liked every single move he's made, including signing the HAVA Act, which is the Help America Vote Act, which really was the floodgates to allowing elections to go be corporately owned by all these corporations, these zombie corporations that nobody knows, these private equity firms, tied in, some of the dirtiest people with the state, to actually manipulate our elections to make sure that the elites, can remain in control. And I think there's been a lot of talk lately too about the CIA's role. First off, I'd like to just say that I hope to God, because I know I haven't been talking about elections much over the last fucking year, right? Because we talk so much about elections that we stopped talking about it because what more is there to be said? Have we not proven our election system has no chain of custody, that the counting is done by black box in the dark? You know what I'm saying? There's so many ways, and we gone and witnessed actual elections that are transparent. We witnessed elections in other countries that are fair. We have a unique perspective on this. But there's still a lot of people who've been staying on top of these things, fam, talking about elections in Arizona, especially these cases. They've been highlighting so many things. I know a lot of people haven't been paying attention to them, but very similar to what we're saying, talking about the signature verification process. Well, if we had a process where you only had maybe less than 5% mail-in ballots because somebody who is handicapped, somebody who's in the military, somebody who really needs to do so to get a mail-in ballot, and they had to do it every year, they had to sign up every election cycle, not just this whole list, we wouldn't be talking about election verification. You're not going to have a fair election if 75% of your ballots, in the case of Arizona, are mail-in ballots that are mailed out earlier, that are no chain of custody. You're not going to have a fair election. You need to start eliminating that process. We need to go back. There's a reason why countries like France eliminated mail-ins and they don't do it anymore. It's just not fair. They're not done in any of the countries we go to. And I'm not saying we have to eliminate it completely, but it definitely has to be tightened up. You know what I'm saying? If we do that, and seriously tightened up. But people are still just concentrating on the CIA. They're concentrating on the who, which is conjecture, which is speculative, rather than the what. It's the system itself that's messed up. But a guy who fought the CIA often, and I went back and I listened to his speech in 1963, and I just want to point out that this is an amazing speech over here. The reason why I went back and looked at this speech from 1963 is because I was watching a video with RFK, and he was on Dave Smith's show. Dave Smith has been on this show several times with Jimmy Dore, talking about the Smith-Dore 24th, then people were joking around about it. Libertarians and anti-imperialist leftists like myself having solutions and talks and conversations about how do we come up with Medicare for all, or a form of Medicare for all, which is another thing that's going on, fam, where people are going, well, this guy's not for Medicare for all. Well, you have to explain to me what Medicare for all is nowadays, because I don't even know what it is. I sure as hell don't want Pramila's bill. I don't want Bernie's bill. You know what I'm saying? I do feel that healthcare is a human right, but Medicare for all means something different than it might have meant going back 7 years ago, fam. It just does, especially after the COVID era. But this particular speech is so important, fam, because he talks in this speech at this time. There's a lot of crazy stuff that was going on with Russia, right? This is 5 months before he was killed. This is right after he made a secret deal to talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis, how they ended it. And RFK was talking about inside his uncle's house, there was a red phone, fam, and it was a direct phone to Russia, to Khrushchev, so that Kennedy and Khrushchev can talk, because they were both surrounded by a military-industrial complex of sorts in Russia, just surrounded by generals who were, the situation where they even had to have hands off, and they had to have these private conversations because they wanted to obtain peace. And throughout this speech, he talks about the relationship of the United States and Russia, right? How important it was, how important it is to obtain peace, because without peace, we don't have anything. But the most important thing about this speech is he also talked about the relationship with the United States citizens with each other. And there was very many things that I heard inside this speech where I can think that even anarchists would like, where he said, we don't have to love each other, we don't have to agree on everything, but we do have to live together. And hearing these conversations, and the thing that RFK kept saying, fam, to me in this interview with Dave Smith that was so interesting was he goes, my uncle has more streets, more roads, more statues, more anything inside Latin America than any single president in the United States. And I started thinking, fam, do you remember when we went into the when we were in the Honduras, fam?
Mm-hmm.
When we went to the Libre Party's
Mm-hmm.
we went into the Libre Party's headquarters, and we were going to see Manuel Zelaya. I couldn't believe it. I was still like, holy shit, Manuel Zelaya is not going to come walking in here. He did. But up on the wall, you have pictures of him and Castro. You have him with pictures in the Chavistas. You can see Hugo Chavez over there. You got pictures of this. Shortly after this picture right here, he was cooed. You know what I'm saying? They removed him for making these alliances and Alba, There he is with Hugo Chavez. There was pictures of him and Castro. But, fam, who was the one? I'm sorry. There's you and Wyatt saying hello. Here's another. There's Evo. There's Ortega. There's Chavez. And our boy, is that Correa from Ecuador? There he is. There's a picture of not
Castro,
Chavez and Castro. And some more pictures of him and Ortega again, Hugo, and fam. Look who the one United States president on that wall was.
Mm-hmm.
John F. Kennedy. And I know there's a lot of shit going on right now as far as there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. There's a lot of areas in which, RFK, how are you going to even win when you have a 0% chance of winning when the DNC is a rigged situation, right? But the thing I've been trying to listen to and I've been trying to hear is he cut from the same cloth as his uncle and his father? And so far, when I hear him speak, I really do think that he is. He said something amazing in this interview yesterday that I was like, holy shit, that's what I've been saying for quite some time. I said when I did the MAGA in the Middle guy show, the MAGA guy, my friend, he goes, well, would you fortify the border at any cost? I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. Let's just pretend that you're the conservative president, I'm the leftist president, whatever, we're making a deal, we're in Congress. I'll give you a wall with lasers. I'll give you whatever you want. You close down those bases, those 82 bases in Latin America. Well, RFK didn't say that at all, but he said something very significant and very close to that. And that was what we should be doing is instead of going around the world looking for devils and demons, we should fortify the United States, bring everybody home, make it almost economically impossible to invade our country, fortify it like never before, and then stop our imperialism overseas and down south. And that's something that I like that I heard, and I didn't put a whole segment in today, but I did want to talk about it because it did make me think. I'm like, holy shit, was John F. Kennedy on the wall when me and Fee went to Honduras? He was, and I had a picture of it, and I saved it. So that's just something interesting to talk about because the more you hear this guy talk, the more you see he is cut from the same cloth as his uncle and his father, and I think that's important. I think we need to have those conversations. It's more logical, and I don't like a lot of things. But he was talking about why we were in this mess in the Ukraine in the first place. Talking about that Victoria Nuland phone call, talking about everything that what's going on. Despite his son going off and fighting there without him telling him, you know what I'm saying? This is the rhetoric I think we need more than anything, because whether we want to deny it or not or accept it, and I get it, electoral politics and the minds of a lot of it stinks. But it's the presidential elections still, they move people. People get involved. It's the only time they get involved for some people. And there's going to be a lot of conversations, a lot of talks in the future. And the guy is polling above 20% now, fam. It's going to take off like crazy. And there's going to be a lot more conversations going on, including those conversations he had with the crystal balls and other people as they challenge him when it comes to the COVID narrative.
Yeah, I don't base my assessments on how I feel about a candidate anymore, because a lot of them can say the right things, can seem like good people. Look at Bernie Sanders. I mean, Bernie Sanders, I still don't think he's an evil person, but at the end of the day, I do think that there is an establishment, there is a need, there's certain people surrounding RFK that I just wouldn't trust with a 10-foot pole. And I don't necessarily think he is that similar to his uncle. I think there's lots of differences, but we'll be here all night if we sit and discuss them. I also, at the end of the day, my biggest criticism is I'm not mad he's running. I think that's fine. I think it does add to the conversation. I do think he's a better candidate that's out there in general, both on the Republican and Democratic ticket. But I do think that it is allowing people to make arguments to continue to vote in the duopoly, to continue to go back into the Democratic Party, to continue something that hasn't worked. And people are bending over backwards to make the argument that this time it will be different. And I just do not see how this time it will be different given the mechanisms we have. And yeah, you're right. People do get excited about presidential election. That's precisely the problem. They only get excited about a presidential election and then they forget about anything the rest of the time. And then they go and do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. The American people are propagandized. The American people are selfish. A lot of them, in a way, it's been made like this because of the propaganda. A lot of people are also in debt. They're also hurting. They're also going through tough times right now, especially right now with everything that's happening. Yeah. And I think that's just a recipe for continuing to participate in this farcical system. And I just refuse to continue to participate in it. And I think, in my opinion, it is extremely naive to think that you can change it by continuing to vote if it's already rigged. And I agree that the conversations he's bringing are new. But again, I have my suspicions. I'm just not there.
Yeah. I get you. I think that the people, we're going to go where the people go, obviously, as this unfolds and we see how things do unfold. I mean, I think we'll be a great balance, the show here, when we talk about the things we talked in the first segment today, bringing that news and that information for you. That's because it's not being talked about, but giving a different perspective on what is being talked about, and making sure that we push back against the mainstream media's narrative out there. I'm not saying they're going to be driving our bus. I just think it will be part of the conversations that will be in front of us. The first question I intended to ask RFK when I saw him is what he was going to do about Assange. But he's already come out and said, when he was asked on that Crystal Ball show, what is the first thing you will do as president? Free Assange. It's the first thing. And all the Assange people, Misty included, need to take advantage of that. Because here we are, we have a presidential candidate coming out saying the first thing he's going to do is talk about Assange. I talked to Steve. I think Steve not talking about SSRIs as RFK is saying we need to look at these SSRIs. We need to understand what the big pharma companies are doing. This is not just about COVID. It's what they're doing to us in general and poisoning us. But my first question to him will be now as well, because he did talk about the story on the Dave Smith show about how he was lied to by his uncle, JFK, was lied to about what happened in Cuba, that there were 1,200 soldiers that were going to storm the beaches, that the discontent, the disgust for Fidel Castro is so strong in Cuba that when they land on the beach, they're going to be looked at as liberators and they're going to get behind them, and that's it. And he understood that he was lied to, that that was just nothing but false. And that's when he came out and said that he wanted to shatter the CIA in a million pieces and let it flow like dust into the wind, or wherever the saying is, but I'm going to ask RFK. My first question to him is going to be about Cuba, because there's a long school relationship. There was controversial decisions made by his uncle, but what would he intend to do with Cuba? Does he intend to no longer label them a state sponsor of terror? Is he going to lift the blockade? What are you going to do if you were to be the president, Mr. RFK, when it comes to Cuba? So that will be my first question when I see him. And there's a lot more other questions to come, fam. I have to agree with you 1,000% that when he does say stupid things like Putin's a gangster, Putin's a thug, even though before that he said everything we would say leading up to that, which is the confusing part, which I have a hard time when people go, I believe in the Second Amendment for safety and defending myself. Everybody, including RFK, will say that these guys had all these things going on there. Minsk was lied about. They threw the election. They put in a puppet government. These people killed Russians in the Donbass, 14,000 of them. But the Russian Federation and Putin shouldn't have invaded. I don't get that. And if you're calling him a thug, a gangster, how do you plan on talking to him for nuclear de-escalation when you're calling him a thug and a gangster and shit, it doesn't help. I don't remember your uncle calling, Khrushchev that. So that's something I would like to know. There's a lot of things, the way he looks at immigrants. I don't care as much about the old school things that happened in the Democratic Party, being a lifelong Democrat. A lot of things I had to turn a blind eye on with Bernie, especially when it came to Kosovo, right? It's like, holy shit, there's a lot of things where I just turn my eye on. Same thing with Tulsi. Counselor for Foreign Relations, young globalist leader, all this shit I can accept those things. It's where you're moving forward to, how you're talking about things in the future, including the election system that you have even recognized that has messed up itself. How are you going to fix that?
Yep. We're not going to agree on this, so it's just kind of pointless.
Boring you with the RFK news. My apologies.
Yeah, I'm just not. Nah. Yeah, we'll see what happens, but I just don't buy anything anymore. Especially running as a Democrat. I get it. I get the strategy, but I made a promise, and I'm never going to go back from that promise.
Well,
I'm not going to go back. You know
what I'm saying? Not just yet. He ain't got my vote. I'll tell you that much. Right now, as we stand, I'm a third party guy, and I was looking forward to voting for the Libertarian. From what I understand, that Dave Smith was supposed to be the front runner, but he did give a great interview with RFK because he was so happy because he looked about RFK kind of signaling the same things that Ron Paul signaled to in his election years ago. And that speech by Kennedy in '63, guys, go back and look. It's at American University. I'm voting in the duopoly. I'm voting third party. It was at American University, and we're at even more dangerous times right now when it comes to our situation with Russia. And you got to listen to the way JFK talked about how we should treat Russia. And he's made it very clear, fam, that he's not a communist, but how do we treat communists, and it's a great speech. And then he dips into our relationships with each other, he dips into how do we as American citizens treat each other? Very important, because how can we ask for peace between the two other countries when there's not peace between each other, between our neighbors? Something we have to talk about